Saw your message, Julian. We're going to post the recording of the meeting to our YouTube channel. So I think we can put the program and the slides up there as well. All right, Mr. Sam Shorter, it's 12 o'clock. We're ready to start the show.
All right, well, let's get started. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Sam Shorter, and I'm the president of the Austin branch of ASCE. I'd like to welcome you to our November luncheon. We've got a great presentation today. You'll hear more about the Waterloo Park and the Greenway and some of the exciting developments in the downtown area. And you're going to hear about a number of our activities from some of our others here, but just wanted to highlight a couple of new committee members. Mindy Hong and Marita Moya have signed up to help out, and we have one additional committee slot that we need to fill, and that's the E-Week student outreach position. So if you're interested, just let me know and we can get you plugged in. We do have some upcoming community service opportunities, and you'll hear more about that from Laura and Michael. We also have some student outreach activities coming up with the Engineering Blitz here in November, and then also Engineers Day at the Science Mill there in February. Like for you all to get engaged and get involved. Also like to give you a friendly reminder to renew your membership. Generally those come up at the end of the year, and so if you would check in just to make sure you're current. And so with that, the last item is we hope to return in January in person, and we're currently scouting a few venues and trying to hone in on the best venue for our group. And so we'll share more about that once we're able to. So with that, call this meeting to order and pass it back to Tyler.
Thank you, Sam. My name is Tyler Doobie. I'm your Vice President of Programs. For today's meeting, I did post the slides and the meeting program to the chat. Some of you can see it, some of you can't. We're working through that, but we'll get it posted to our website after the meeting, and the recording of today's meeting is underway, and we'll post that to our YouTube channel. It's also, I want to make sure everybody is aware, it's also totally fine if you follow along with your phone while we're doing these announcements. We've added these QR codes to scan with your camera app, so that you can sign up for things or give us some money. So with that, I'd like you to scan this code now, please, because we are seeking branch sponsors, event sponsors, and meeting sponsors. If you don't see your firm's logo on our sponsorship slide, you got to wonder why. Is that somebody else's job? Who does that? You know, most of the time when I ask people, they say, oh yeah, we should probably do that. I'll get with our execs and we'll see if we can get it approved. If you or even a couple of people from your firm are attending these meetings or volunteering regularly, you should consider sponsorship. It's not only to show your firm is an active participant in the professional community, but it also helps support our mission. For participation prizes at our upcoming Keeling Engineering Blitz, I just bought $650 worth of color-changing pencils that say ASCE and Future Civil Engineer. And for the grand prize, there's some construction-themed Lego sets. And you know, all it takes is a meeting sponsor and a branch sponsor to make stuff like that happen. So take care of this now and make a reminder if you want to do this after lunch or before you go for Thanksgiving. That'll really help us. Now I'm going to turn it over to Laura Friello with a community service announcement.
All right, thank you very much. So we are officially getting some of our projects that we've been wanting to do up and running and are really excited to see everybody in person. Michael will talk a little bit about our specifics, but we have now kind of morphed into this winter service event as our first real big in-person. We're really excited about it and hope everybody will be willing and able to devote their time, and also keep an eye out. In the next couple of months, we'll be announcing some other stuff that we've been working on. But first up in our event in January, I'll let Michael Chavez talk a little bit about specifics.
Thanks, Laura. So yeah, we have an event date secured with Mobile Loaves and Fishes. Mobile Loaves and Fishes is an organization that helps to provide affordable permanent housing and community for the disabled and chronically homeless in Texas. So this event will be an outdoor hands-on event. So generally some of the tasks that they ask volunteers to help out with involve light landscaping and tending the community garden. So as shown on the screen, the event will be Saturday, January 15th from 9 a.m. to 12 noon. We have 15 spots reserved for ASCE. So if you're interested in attending, please email us at communityoutreach@austinasce.org. And then once we get your information in the beginning of January, we'll follow up with more details and the link to the registration form and waiver. But yeah. That's what I got.
Thank you, Michael.
Yep, thank you.
Next up is SEI. This message is from Scott Wallace, who unfortunately couldn't be here today, but he asked me to deliver this message. The next meeting is November 18th, this Thursday, and it features Dr. Wasim Ghanum, Associate Professor at UTSA and one of the founding members of our SEI chapter. He's going to be presenting his latest research on bridge load testing using digital image correlation technology. Registration and more information can be found at the website shown on the bottom of the screen or following the QR code. Also, join us virtually for the inaugural SEI Texas Section annual meeting on Tuesday, January 25th, 2022. This seminar is jointly organized by SEI Houston, Austin, and Dallas branches and aims to bring together Texas structural engineers across the state to engage in 3 seminar sessions focused on unique projects across Texas. The event provides an opportunity for structural engineers to learn more about some of the fascinating and technically challenging engineering projects, including transportation, entertainment, and building infrastructure. More details and registration information can be found at the SEI Texas section website or upcoming SEI blast emails. Finally, we have our premier event, SET. Currently, it's targeting spring of 2022. If you don't know what SET is, think of it as TED Talks meets Alamo Drafthouse. The overall goal is to have 4 presentations that each depart from a normal in the weed structural engineering technical presentation, but are still related to our profession. It's a lot of fun and truly an Austin original, so watch the website for more details. Next up, Stuart Verhulst will share information on the upcoming Forensic Engineering Congress.
Thanks, Tyler. Hi, everybody. I'm Stuart Verhulst. I'm the chair of the Forensic Engineering Division, which is a technical division within ASCE that's focused on forensic engineering and forensic investigations. Our technical group has a handful of committees related to different aspects of this, and essentially our mission is to investigate failures, to disseminate the information on failures, and to prevent those failures from happening in the future. So we are having a virtual roundtable on December 7th of this year. And then our Congress, which is our triannual event, we have every 3 years historically. Our Congress will be next year in 2022, November 7th, 4th through 7th in Denver. And so for this roundtable, this will be it's just going to be a 90-minute discussion on forensic engineering from some members in the division. And it will be kind of a good introduction to the division if anyone's interested in it. Obviously, we're going to promote the Congress. One thing to note, if you do have a forensic paper that you'd like to present at the Congress, the call for abstracts is still open, I think, till December 10th or maybe shortly thereafter. So please feel free to look that up. Follow this QR code or link for registration at the roundtable, and you can find information on the Congress as well. But the Forensic Engineering Division is a good group, and we would certainly welcome interested people to join us for the Congress and perhaps even join the division. So I appreciate it, and thank you, Tyler.
Sure, thank you. Next up is the Engineering Blitz 2021. I mentioned this earlier. This is going to be the 3rd annual STEM event that we've hosted at Keeling Middle School that educates young Austinites about engineering. At this time, we're asking for volunteers to sign up and block out time on your calendars the week after Thanksgiving. It's either Tuesday, November 30th or Wednesday, December 1st. You can scan the code to follow to the event's sign up page and sign up for either day or both. Since we're not allowed in the classroom due to COVID restrictions at the school, they've asked us to create an activity that the teachers can administer during the students' advisory period. We've basically turned it into a contest amongst the students across all of the classes during the advisory period for the tallest tower or the strongest paper bridge using plastic cups, popsicle sticks, paper, and metal hardware. So over 400 students will walk away with a color-changing pencil. This is like a mood ring, but on a pencil, basically gold for a 6th grader. And the winning teams are going to get a set of Legos. So what do you get to do? Well, a few of you will attend the Zoom contest virtually and talk about yourself and why you became a civil engineer. A few of you will show up with me at the school around lunch after the event's first day to help collect the activity supplies and help repackage and restock for the second day. And a few of you are going to help me do that on the second day, and so we can store it for long-term for next year. So I do need some warm bodies to make this happen, and I know you're all dying to get back in person to see your closest engineering friends. So here's your next opportunity. Please sign up. Next up, we're going to hear from Kaylin Hudson with YMF.
Hey guys, those of you who I do not know, I am the YMF director for the ASCE Austin branch, and YMF is the Younger Member Forum. So if you're an ASCE member 35 or younger, you're automatically enrolled. But if you do not receive our newsletters and you're not following us on social media, I would highly recommend you do so. That's where we talk about all of our events and everything that we have going on. And some of our upcoming events, we have this East Side bike ride. So it'll be a 13-mile loop, or there's a shorter 5-mile loop, and they're going to start and end at Lazarus Brewing. If you don't want to ride a bike, you can also just meet them at the brewery at 11:30 to just enjoy some beer. And the other thing we have coming up this holiday social, we're planning on doing a teddy bear drive on December 16th. So sign up for our newsletter or follow us on social media to find out more about those events. Thank you.
Next, we're going to turn it over to Janae Landry to discuss a donation opportunity for today's meeting.
Hi, everyone. Janae Landry. I'm the treasurer of ASCE Austin branch this year. You may have noticed when you registered for this meeting that the registration was a little bit different. Typically, there's PayPal payment option embedded into your registration. We're having some technical difficulties, and so we had to separate donation and registration into two links. Because of that, I think most people registered, but not many people have donated yet. So we just wanted to give you one more time to donate. The link is listed here on the slide, and it's also in the chat. Suggested registration donations are anywhere between $10 and $35. And this does cover the cost of putting on this meeting. We do have to pay a monthly Zoom cost. We also have numerous other expenses. Tyler mentioned the outreach event at Keating Middle School. So your registration for these monthly meetings helps cover those costs. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so next we're going to hear from today's sponsor, WGI, and Principal Engineer Brad Lingby. Brad, take it over.
Thanks, Tyler. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for having me. Appreciate the chance to tell a little bit about Waterloo Park and WGI to ASCE. I'm going to talk about some of the big civil engineering challenges that were tackled on Waterloo Park and lead into John Rigdon's presentation. I haven't seen exactly what he's going to talk about, but having walked the site with him a couple of times, I've got a pretty good idea. But before that, I want to tell you about WGI. WGI is a multi-services engineering firm with offices around the central Texas area, Dallas, Houston, Austin, and San Antonio, and up and down the East Coast. In addition to some offices in the Midwest, Michigan, Chicago. We are multi-services firm that offer surveying. Tyler, if you could go to the next slide. Offer services in surveying, civil engineering, MEP, structural, environmental, in addition to everything else you see listed here and some other stuff. It's a very innovative and progressive company, and we are always looking for team members who are looking for a challenge. So if you or anyone you know are looking for a new opportunity, you can call our offices at 512-669-5560 or find the careers tab at wginc.com. Next slide. So what we are looking at here is an aerial view of Waterloo Park, which is located in between 12th and 15th Street, between Trinity and the old Red River. I guess it's still Red River, but adjacent to some new office buildings and a upcoming promenade also on the east side of the site. The site took many years of planning, not just accounting for the tunnel, but the park itself. Went through a couple of different design iterations with the design team that was led by Michael Van Valkenburg and Associates out of New York City, and extensive consultant team that had over 20 members that were regularly contributing. Next slide. The site itself was developed through 3 different site development permits, including the tunnel, which was not directly impacted by the site design of the park. The park was designed around the resultant tunnel construction, but there was a lot of coordination between the tunnel engineering team and the park designers. And then there were 2 site development permits that were directly affected by the park. One being the structural site development permit for the lawn support that extends out over the creek. Next slide. And then the second being the actual park site development permit, where the music venue, walkways, playground, trails, water quality facilities were all designed and permitted. The tunnel intake facility that we're looking at here is the primary intake facility for the tunnel. It's actually one of 3 that are located along Waller Creek. But this is the first one, and that facility frees up about 20 acres of downtown property. As I mentioned, the lawn, if you go to the next slide, Tyler, extends over the creek and provides additional area, not just for the park, but also for the venue and the seating for anyone who's going to see a show at Waterloo Park. What we see in this slide is actually one of my favorite parts of the park is a ADA route that is not a ramp. It's a under 5% slope walkway that extends from 12th and Trinity, which is the highest point of the site, all the way down to the 14th Street Bridge that crosses Waller Creek and allows accessible access all through the site. There are also, you can go to the next slide, multiple trees and heritage trees that were relocated from the Capitol complex or other sites around Waterloo Park that create the ambiance and the natural feel of the Moody Amphitheater and Waterloo Park. And I think the next slide is aerial, back to the aerial view. And we're just really proud of it, and appreciate hearing John tell us all more about it. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Brad. As we move into today's presentation, if you have a question for the presenter, you can post it in the chat, and time permitting, I will moderate the Q&A at the end. The meeting is being recorded and will be posted to our branch's YouTube channel afterwards, along with a PDF of the program and meeting the introduction slides. So I'd like to now introduce our speaker for today while he gets his screen set up to share. John Rigdon, Director of Planning and Design with the Waterloo Greenway, is set to tell us a little bit about Austin's latest downtown park improvements and upcoming activities along Waller Creek from Waterloo Park to Lady Bird Lake. John is the leader of the Greenway's capital projects, weaving the downtown's stakeholders' interests with the design team's objectives to develop downtown Austin's Waller Creek. His training includes sustainable city planning and community engagement, project management, design, and programming. John earned a master's degree in community and regional planning from the University of Texas at Austin. John, thank you so much for being here today. The floor is yours.
Great. Thank you, Tyler. And thanks for having me today. And thanks, Brad, for leading that introduction and for all the work that WGI did to make this happen. So let me pull up my screen here. And can we see, Tyler?
I can see it.
All right, great. Well, Brad provided some great photos and video of some of the elements of the park I'm going to talk about, and there's some additional ones as well. And I hope folks will come see the park in person. But I'm going to kind of walk you through a virtual tour of the park, talk about what we're doing as an organization, and some of my favorite interesting moments and challenges throughout the design process, a little bit of a behind the scenes look. So, to start, who are we and what are we doing? So the Waterloo Greenway Conservancy is in a partnership with the city of Austin. We're a public-private partnership, and the sort of sole mission of our partnership is to execute the parks and open space along Waller Creek that we call Waterloo Greenway. So we each have different roles and responsibilities that overlap and sometimes are completely separate. But in the big picture, Waterloo Greenway Conservancy's responsibility is to lead the design, planning, and implementation of the projects. We have a large fundraising component. Also, and importantly, long-term, we are solely responsible for the operations, maintenance, and programming of these public spaces. So, we're designing them kind of above and beyond, but then maintaining and operating them at a very high level. So if you come out to the park, you will see ambassadors on site through a partnership with the Downtown Austin Alliance. You'll see programs and activities. You'll see concerts. This is a very active park space. It's a park for people and programs. And you'll see that as we move through the slides showing areas of the project. Our mission, and I won't read all this to you, but the important parts, and sort of gold there, it's for the benefit of all. So this is a park that happens geographically to be downtown, on the eastern side of downtown. And that's beneficial because it's geographically centrally located and convenient and accessible by transit. But this is a park for our entire city and our entire region. It is not a neighborhood park for those who live and work downtown, although they are key constituents. We intend this to be for everyone, and our programs and design and everything we do is intended to encourage that. So, Waterloo Greenway. This map shows the city of Austin, and on the eastern side of downtown is Waller Creek there in white. And so Waller Creek flows, all the way from 183 down to the lake. And the section we're talking about here, as Brad mentioned, is really 15th Street to the lake. And today we're going to focus on phase 1. I'll just highlight that in green, the overall Waterloo Greenway project, which is a multi-phase project, is about 35 acres of new and restored public open space along 1.5 miles of restored Waller Creek. In total, this is a approximately $265 million project. And we're still raising money. So we're still raising about $50 million to close out our capital campaign. So if you're interested in getting involved in that way, please feel free to reach out to me. And we're going to do it in phases, in part because of the cost, but also in part because of the complexity of building such a large project in an area with so much growth and development. So, it's important to talk about the opportunity facilitated by the tunnel. And Brad touched on this earlier, but really the tunnel takes 28 acres of land out of the floodplain in downtown Austin. And you can see kind of the schematic view of where the tunnel's located and what it does, but really it captures all of those floodwaters from the northern reaches of Waller Creek, which is a very urbanized creek. So it was subject to tremendous flash floods, causing millions of dollars in property damage, dozens of lives lost over the years. And what this flood control tunnel does is it takes the land out of the floodplain, allowing for a lot of the development that we see downtown that many of you are probably involved in, and as well as the opportunity to build safe, accessible, and maintainable parks along creek level. And so that's really where we come in. So the city of Austin, when they built this flood control tunnel, or when they planned it, reached out to our founders and asked, how can we make these public spaces around the creek better? And that was sort of the nexus for forming the 501c3 that is Waterloo Greenway Conservancy, and also a design competition, which led to the selection of this great team, as Brad mentioned, led by Michael Van Valkenburg and Associates on the landscape side, and Thomas Pfeiffer and Partners on the architecture side, and having a tremendous local team, including WGI, DWG, Michael Shue Office of Architecture, AEC, and numerous other tremendous local contributors to this project. Dozens of local firms worked on this. So that design competition led to the vision of the 35 acres. And as I mentioned, it's broken down into phases. So you can see roughly where the phases are here, just to better fit the screen ratio, but also keep everybody on their toes. North is now to the right instead of at the top of the screen. So you can see that phase 1 is Waterloo Park, and that's really what I'm going to focus on today. And then phase 2 is in gold there to the south. And so our next phase is, we call it the confluence. And that section of work from 4th Street to the lake is anticipated to break ground in the spring. So expect more construction, and in 3 years, expect another beautiful park connecting the lake up to the Lance Armstrong Bikeway, Convention Center, downtown Metro Rail Station, and downtown in general. So that's phase 2. And then we're going to meet in the middle. So this is a long-term project taking approximately 8 to 10 years more from now to really finish. And a lot of that will depend on fundraising and timing and constructability. So focusing on phase 1, which is Waterloo Park. So, this is the vision from early on. We have this 10.5-acre park in the northern area of downtown, but an area that is increasingly urbanizing and, becoming more of a neighborhood, more of a space where people work and live. And we wanted to kind of pick up on the history of the park as a special event space and a community gathering space, but also restore a lot of the natural elements of the park and create, a tremendous amenity for walking and enjoying the park accessibly. So this image shows kind of the glowing amphitheater in the park early on. Here's where we were about a year into construction. This is a lot of the civil work getting done. So a lot of the stuff underground, many surprises along the way as well when you're working in such an old area of the city and something that has been impacted by, years and years of construction from the flood control tunnel. So we're just kind of starting to come up out of the ground here. And you can also see kind of on the left middle of your screen there, that structured lawn out over the creek, which Brad mentioned in his presentation. Then moving forward to, completion of construction, here's where we were. So you can see the amphitheater complete. We've got that grass growing in, and we have the lawn itself complete, as well as the rest of the landscape. So I'm going to kind of walk through different areas of the park, starting with a plan view and kind of hitting different key spots. And I hope you see these in person and have a little bit of background information from my presentation when you experience these parts of the park. So starting as you walk into the amphitheater, really you're greeted by this, tremendous canopy structure and concrete walls. This architecture was designed by Thomas Pfeiffer and Partners from New York. And the intent was for this space to be highly flexible between world-class concerts and general park use like you see here. So we have yoga classes, dance classes, all those types of things, including use of the stage. But then when we have shows, we're able to quickly flip this area, close it off, and utilize it for ticketed private concerts. I'll just point out on both sides of the stage, we have these sort of unassuming concrete walls with steel doors here. And what these contain is all of the support to put on a concert. We're familiar with special events and particularly music here in Austin and parks. And often that's accompanied by, a great experience, followed by weeks of load in before and then weeks of load out afterwards, as well as the time it takes to rest and restore the landscapes impacted by hundreds of temporary toilets, dozens of temporary food trucks, temporary stages, and everything else, including temporary fencing and security. So this facility was really intentionally designed to have all of that built into the hillside, built into the landscape, and able to be opened and closed when needed. So here you're looking at 12 concession windows, which serve food and alcohol during events. We can open them all, we can open some of them. Also, we have 80 toilets, which are built into these structures with occupiable and green roofs to support those events as well. So no temporary toilets or any type of infrastructure is needed to be brought in. So jumping forward, that brings us to kind of the lower lawn, which is sort of the central space of the park. Here it is during a show, before everyone shows up. You can see we bring out 3,000 temporary chairs that we store on site. Those are brought out, set up on this beautiful lawn, and then those are ticketed. You can also see the infrastructure mounted on the canopy that enables a show. So the beautiful white canopy floating overhead, and then all of the temporary infrastructure required, including lights, sound, and everything else below that. One thing I'll point out is that, we have this really robust lawn, and it requires a lot of watering, and it takes up a tremendous amount of surface area in the park, but that's really necessary to balance these public uses with show uses. One of the key kind of innovations in the project to manage the stormwater runoff in that area was the creation of a large 47,000 gallon cistern underneath the front of the stage that takes that water volume and then treats it through a treatment train of rain gardens. And very few people will ever see this unless I point it out to you. So I'm excited for you to go on site and see these areas I'm talking about. So this started with digging a very sizable hole underneath that lawn I just showed you, where we had all those chairs. And here that is being excavated. And that's where the 47,000 gallon cistern goes. That then flows to a series of rain gardens on the other side of the park. And here's one of those rain gardens. And I'll have to admit, I would call myself a rain garden skeptic or maybe hater even. Rain gardens traditionally, in my view around here, are often monoculture plantings. They're mowed a couple times a year and they don't look particularly nice. So when the design team came to us and said, we're putting 3 of these in prime areas in the landscape, I was highly skeptical. But they did a beautiful job of turning these into garden spaces that are also very functional. And so these 3 rain gardens over here, identified with the white arrows, treat that water all the way from the large lawn at the top of the screen. It's pumped over here and then treated kind of sequentially from the highest down to the lowest, and then released back into the creek as clean water. So a really interesting innovation, and proved me wrong about their aesthetic quality. If you go to Creek Show, which is happening right now, and I've got a plug at the end to share more information about that, you will see one of the light-based art installations is actually in the rain gardens, Rain Garden 2 at the bottom left of the screen there. So an opportunity to see how little it looks like a rain garden and how much it looks like just a part of the overall landscape. Also in this area, I'll point out the canopy itself. So, again, Thomas Pfeiffer and partners designed this, and to create this beautiful kind of trellis over top of the stage. This has 5 miles of steel I-beams integrated into here to construct it. So fortunately, we bought that steel in 2019 and not this year, or maybe we wouldn't have an open park yet. So you can see all of those layers in this in progress construction photo. Also, interestingly, I'll point out, you can see kind of a rectangular cutout there where the roof ceiling's a little bit higher. One of the big challenges on site for us was the Capitol View corridor. We have a Capitol View corridor all along Red River Street towards the Capitol. And so this building is just under that. So we have slightly less height than is ideal from the underside of the steel. So this cutout enables us to get about 5 more feet and hang some of that larger equipment during shows without totally changing the architecture of the facility. Here's just a couple beauty shots of that steel canopy. You can see those 6-inch steel I-beams as they kind of taper out and the layers thin out towards the edges. And here's an overhead shot of that all together. So you'll also see kind of an area where it's a little bit less transparent in the middle. That area has a glass skylight system, which blocks the rain and sends it to gutters, which then make their way to that same cistern so that the performers in the center of the stage have rain protection when they're playing. But it also still allows that light to come through and create that kind of beautiful trellis-like atmosphere underneath. And here's a view of that from an aerial looking at a show. So you can see how all that equipment gets set up and hung underneath the white steel. And this is before everyone's in. So, I think the show ended up being a sellout, but not everyone's there yet. But you can kind of get a sense of the lawn seating to the left on that structured lawn, which stretches out over the creek, and then all of those temporary chairs on the lower lawn. Another key aspect, which Brad mentioned as well, are the tree transplants. We planted over 500 new trees in the park. Those new trees are tomorrow's canopy, the next generation's canopy, but day one shade is so critical to the park experience in Central Texas. It's also critical to habitat. So we had the opportunity to save or accept a number of trees, 8 in fact. 4 were internally relocated and 4 were from adjacent sites. So here are some photos of 2 trees being moved from the straightening of Red River and the building of the new Moody Center on UT's campus into the project. So we were ready and willing to accept any good trees to create shade and work with adjacent partners on this. So you can see it being trucked over, craned into its position, and ultimately placed on that very same structured lawn, providing shade for concert goers, folks enjoying picnics, anyone who enjoys that lawn. Also, this is the biggest tree that we relocated on site. This was a relatively rare partnership between the city, state, and a nonprofit to save a tree. So this was a 41-inch live oak that was rolled over from the northern expansion of the campus of the state capitol. And this tree becomes the shade for the playground ultimately. So you can see it being rolled onto site here. And then here's a photo of that first tree in its final location. So you'll go out on site now and you'll see folks sitting under that tree enjoying picnics almost every day. So really, it's costly, but the impact is huge when these are strategically placed. And our design team did a great job of placing them in the most strategic locations to provide great shade now. Also, we'll just take a peek backstage, which unless you're in a band, you probably won't get to do in person anytime soon. So the backstage here is kind of roughed in. This is all underneath the canopy and underneath the plaza overhead. You can see here columns, which are kind of dropping through the plaza level and into the space below. And this sort of mess of unevenly placed columns has to become all of the back of house support space for major touring acts. So 6 dressing rooms, multiple offices, a kitchen, a large open room for all the touring staff, bathrooms, electrical rooms, IT rooms. All of the support is built underground into the hillside here. So the overhead experience is all of these columns, and then to the left you have a plaza, to the right you have a green roof, and what I just showed you is immediately under this. So you can see those columns here, and then they drop down to become the concrete columns I just showed you. Then this is with the walls, the drywall in, and those offices and dressing rooms being built. You can see it gets real tight. It's we're being very space efficient and trying to keep as much of the park publicly accessible as possible. And then here's just one of those dressing rooms as we were putting in the interior. So, kind of a funky vibe in there, but we have 6 different dressing rooms, all with kind of their own unique vibe. And these are all built underneath green roofs and occupiable plazas into that hillside. So we're not really taking up any of the publicly accessible space for them. Moving forward, we have the Meredith Plaza, the Family Pavilion, and the Suzanne Deal booth, Skywalk, which is kind of another large section of the park. I'll talk a little bit about these trees. So, Waterloo Park has beautiful existing trees, and these are the 2 biggest. So I have these 2 great trees kind of along Trinity Street. And we wanted to use this as an area to provide shaded seating, an opportunity to enjoy lunch, enjoy breakfast. We'll have food trucks on site. And this was just the perfect opportunity for that. So we wanted to build this deck around it. We discovered, there was a deck before, and unfortunately it was built very high up, and 6 or 7 feet of the trunk of the tree was buried. So we had to excavate that, lower the level of the deck, and build this new deck. We also had to be really careful. The designers had to be really careful about where foundations were placed. So you can see some LiDAR scans of the trees and the critical placements of these foundations, avoiding roots. So lots of air spading around these trees to individually place all of these small piers to support this deck structure. And then you can also see how the unique structural support system came together to connect all of those foundation locations. So kind of a view of what's underneath the very evenly placed boards. You can see kind of the challenge that this presented in order to build the deck and safely keep those trees healthy. Then, it wouldn't be without surprises if it wasn't, in Waterloo Park. So towards the end of the project, one of those great trees had a significant branch fall. And we had experts come out and take a look at the tree and determined that it needed additional support to be safely maintained in this location. So our great structural engineers at AEC, worked with our landscape architects and created this support structure, adjustable support structure to hold up the key branches of the tree so that we can safely occupy, and this tree will survive for generations to come. So you can see there, just how that looks. And, it's a really cool opportunity to talk about the value of these trees to the park. Also, we have the Family Pavilion, which is a beautiful restroom and storage facility designed by Michael Shu's Office of Architecture. You can't see it in this photo, but there are 2 food trucks on either side, one to the right and one to the left. And this is really the result of a lot of community engagement around what was once a cafe that became food trucks and a restroom after a lot of community feedback. The restroom itself is a beautiful concrete structure nestled in the hillside, and you'll see a lot of really excellent concrete work and concrete structures throughout. And one of the really cool things about this is based on a lot of engagement with other parks, we let the designers know that these parks are seeing huge lines for hand washing. And this was even pre-pandemic, particularly for kids. And so everyone was waiting to get into a bathroom stall to wash hands, and you ended up with big lines. So the designers pulled the sink out of the bathrooms and put it in this kind of open grotto adjacent to the bathrooms, and you can access it from all sides. And so here's kind of a close-up in progress of that cast in place concrete sink that you can access from all sides. So we can really speed up those hand washing times and make bathroom use more efficient overall. Here we have the Skywalk, and Brad pointed this out as well. I like this in progress photo before handrails and plants are in, because you can really see how the designers put together this thin ribbon of concrete, which navigates a 50-foot grade change from Trinity Street all the way down to closer to the creek. It snakes through there, making that grade change universally acceptable without ramps. It's just a sloped walking surface. And it creates these beautiful views out over the park and landscape. Here's just a look from below. You can kind of see that curved boat-shaped bottom, which really makes it feel thin and light over the landscape. You can also see in this image, those kind of seemingly randomly placed metal columns, and they're painted in a very dark gray. So you'll see in later photos, they really blend into the landscape. So you really just experience this ribbon of concrete. I'll also just show this photo to show you how complicated it was to pour and form this curved bridge. It was post-tension concrete, and it had dozens of custom styrofoam forms that were put on a scaffold in order to create that curved boat-like bottom. So a really complicated structure that ended up looking very beautiful. The Kitty King Powell lawn is our play area. So we really had to focus on nature-based play and using natural materials. So there's 3 core elements. We have our log jam in the background, which is a large climber, mega grass here to the right, which is really big grass. It's more for toddler play. We have some sort of exaggerated landscape hills and areas to climb. And then we have our granite slide, our stone slide and climber around it. And here's a photo in progress. Really the idea behind this was metal and plastic slides can really burn your butt and legs here in Texas. It's just too hot. So we had a custom slide milled in Germany that was designed to be built into this hillside around these kind of karst limestone features and really feel like it's always been a part of the park. Here it is going in, and then here it is being used shortly after our opening. So that's become one of the most popular features of the park. Definitely recommend going down it of all ages when you go visit the park. And you can see here kind of the playground as it sort of nestles next to the food trucks and that family pavilion area. So really trying to create a space that families can spend a whole day, a whole evening enjoying in the park. And then finally, we'll jump over the Hill Country Garden. And this is one of my favorite spaces. You can see here our landscape crew planting. There are over 90,000 plants that we planted in the park. It's 95% native species and 5% adapted. 200 different native species, some really exotic native species, planted in ways that really create this garden-like atmosphere, in addition to those 500 trees we planted. You can also see these stone pathways that are for exploration of the landscape. So ways to kind of extend the play for kids, but also for adults to really enjoy and experience the plants up close. And here is an image of what it looks like from a few weeks ago. The monarchs have just been going crazy, tons of pollinators here. And then, practically every 3 weeks, a different color is really popping in the park. So here you see a lot of blues and purples. We had reds and oranges before. All throughout the year, different things are blooming in different areas, creating real drama in this space, but really focusing in on those native species and the existing beautiful heritage trees. And then finally, I'll show you all some aerial views of the park. So looking from north to south, you can see the restored creek kind of in the bottom there, the Moody Amphitheater canopy, and then the park beyond, as well as that structured lawn out over the creek. Here you can get a view of that Hill Country Garden from overhead, again with a tunnel inlet facility there, and then the Skywalk sort of meandering through the park. You get a really good sense of how it makes up that grade here of 50 feet kind of near the red car all the way down to the lowest point, which is near the creek in that kind of top right. And then here's an aerial looking at a concert, sort of people filtering into the park. I like this one too, because it shows kind of the dual use of the park. That northern third of the park, we put up very minimal temporary fencing for ticketing and closure. Then the rest of the park remains open for general park use, even when a concert's going on. So a really flexible space oriented around programs and activations, but always having kind of those quiet areas for, just enjoyment of nature. And, with that, I'll also just, as I mentioned earlier, plug Creek Show, which is ongoing now in Waterloo Park this year. This is our 7th Creek Show. So folks may have been in the past to Creek shows along Waller Creek that we put on, but really this is a focus on local designers, architects, artists, creating light-based art installations along Waller Creek or in Waterloo Park, and really highlighting different elements of the story of Waller Creek and Waterloo. And we have 6 great installations in the park right now, every night, all the way through Sunday. We have music every night, we have food, we have alcohol, all different types of events and activations for kids in the park. Definitely recommend coming and checking that out this week. And you'll be able to see the park in a very unusual way. And then also really encourage folks who haven't, please come out, after Sunday and enjoy the park and kind of its normal mode. Come see a show, come do a yoga class, come enjoy the park, and you'll have a little bit of backstory behind some of those unique construction challenges that I highlighted in today's presentation. And so with that, I am happy to answer any questions that came through while I was presenting.
Thanks, John. So just as a reminder to everybody how the question and answer works, if you'll post your question in the chat, I'll read through those and we can ask John for his answers. While we're waiting for some of that, I actually had a few. Kind of curious about how COVID has impacted your group's operations and even the grand opening of the park and thereafter. We're starting to see people get a little bit more comfortable going out, doing things. Are you guys at capacity of where you thought you'd be by now? Are you under? Are you over?
Yeah, so it impacted us in a number of ways. I mean, there were some delays in construction related to that, which I think all construction projects experience in some way. But for us, the grand opening happened when the park was done. It didn't happen in the way we thought it would because COVID impacted our ability to put on a really large event. But it just, it wasn't right to have a finished park and not deliver it to the community, particularly when everyone needed outdoor space so much. So we had kind of a softer opening on the programs and event side, where we invited the community to start using the park. We have been having concerts, following the safety protocols. So we've had a number of shows, including some sellout shows in the Moody Amphitheater. And then right now for Creek Show, we are doing free tickets. So, if you want to attend there, you can sign up and get a free ticket on our website. And that allows us to manage the crowds a little bit more. So we're able to provide that space in the park. And also in part, we use the park so that the crowd could be more spread out when traditionally we've used the creek where things are just a little bit tighter and you're passing by people. So the tickets and the park space itself allows us to have a more spread out experience for this. We're monitoring it every week and adapting as we go. But having such a big and open park and being able to open that to the community at this time has been really critical and great to see people using it.
That's great. Here's a question from Paul Jensen. Are there plans to continue north all the way through the UT campus?
Not by our organization. However, UT already did some extensive renovations of the creek right by the med school. And I know that their sort of future campus plans have more of a focus on Waller Creek and restorations. I will say the one thing that is a unique challenge for them, separate from what we have, is the flood control tunnel only manages floodwaters from 12th Street South. So UT will still be subject to those large flood events. So they have to build a much more armored creek, a deeper and wider creek to accommodate those floodwaters. For us, organizationally, kind of beyond the immediate footprint of our project, we definitely are engaged in watershed-wide talks about water quality, how we can improve that, how we can improve stormwater in general, And, because we're the bottom of the watershed. So whatever happens above us really impacts us. So definitely at that level, particularly with our partners in the Watershed Protection Department. But yeah, UT has plans for improvements, but they will necessarily look different because of the floodwaters.
What were some of the unusual findings you found during the excavation?
Oh, there were many. I mean, so this area used to be a neighborhood up until the 70s. So, it's one of the stories we tell about the park. That's, one of the maybe less positive stories is urban renewal and the history of the removal of a neighborhood here to create a park in the 70s. And, because of that, because of the age of this area, there were some surprise utilities, particularly in the creek, some easements that were, not quite documented in the correct place that were discovered during excavation. So there were things like that we discovered as we were going along. The discoveries in Trinity Street of, utility issues were tremendously impactful as well. Really, once we got underground, there were a lot of surprises, and we had to adapt to those through the project. And then, things came up like that tree support structure, where the past mistreatment of that tree caught up to us, fortunately, before the park opened, but we had to adapt and make some changes on the fly there as well.
What about the winter storm? Did you have any rework after the big freeze in February?
Well, through in part good fortune, but also good design and planning, we were very minimally impacted, actually. I think it's, a testament to the soils, extensive, soil replacement, the irrigation plan and the irrigation system, and also the species selected. We probably lost 2 to 3% of our plants. And those were really the agaves, the cactus, some of those type plants, particularly on kind of the sort of separated green roof areas. But generally, things on the plants went really, really well for us, which was great. We were very excited to see that. And we're monitoring trees. That's going to take a longer time to make sure that some of the new trees survive through that event. But overall, we were very fortunate, and again, a testament to the design team.
Looking back at your organization, is the Waterloo Greenway modeled after any peer organizations or even the park itself? Are you looking to other park projects around the country, around the world, to try to emulate anything you're seeing?
Yeah, great question. I think this public-private partnership Conservancy model is relatively newer in the approach to public open space. There's past examples that sort of helped create kind of this idea. I mean, one we looked to early on was the High Line in New York quite a bit. They had a friends group model, which sort of became the 501c3 partner to the city and followed kind of along a similar trajectory. And so we looked at them. I would say this is an increasing model in use both locally and nationally as parks budgets are really spread thin and as our population grows and our demands on park spaces increase. As far as the park goes itself, our designers bring a lot of experience with these large urban parks. MVVA worked on Brooklyn Bridge Park in New York. They did the new St. Louis Arch Grounds. They also did a great park in Tulsa called the Gathering Place, which is kind of a big new urban park just outside of kind of like downtown Tulsa area. So they have a lot of experience with that and that they brought to bear on this, as well as, peer projects like the High Line that really kind of informed some of the thinking about how we approach public space.
I got another question about the cultural history of the neighborhood. You mentioned some activity in the 70s to create the park space. Can you elaborate a little bit more on kind of what that cultural history was and how it was taken into account during the design and construction phases?
Yeah, absolutely. So, in the 70s, this area was effectively, acquired by the city through eminent domain and kind of the urban renewal era of planning. It was a primarily African-American neighborhood, as often as the case with these urban renewal efforts. And, we did extensive research and a history report, both from text, images, oral histories, to gather information about the neighborhood and the adjacent nearby areas. And that work informed the project physically. Also, it informed our signage, programs, and interpretation as we kind of move forward. So throughout the park, kind of some of the most obvious physical manifestations of that work you'll see is we have interpretive signs that, also with links to more history on our website, where there's a history report. And those are throughout the park, which in part tell us history. Also, our programs, our engagement, and kind of what we do within the park is informed by the historical neighborhood and those events as well. So you'll see that as kind of a through line. And, we're happy to share that report research with anyone who's interested. It was really, eye-opening and important to, what we're doing as an organization.
All right, well, thank you, John. This about wraps up our Q&A period. I'd like to go ahead and turn it back over to Sam to close out today's meeting and announce our head count.
All right, this is Sam Shorter again. Thank you all for your attendance today at our luncheon. I believe I saw a peak number of 68 attendees. And so thank you all for attending. And we look forward to seeing you all next month. We'll have our presentation from the Texas Board of Professional Engineers and Land Surveyors for our annual ethics presentation. So hopefully that'll be our last virtual meeting. Again, stay tuned for what happens in January or dates after that. And so with that, this meeting is adjourned, and I appreciate y'all attending. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, everyone, for attending. And thank you, John. Thank you, Brad, for the presentation. Y'all have a good rest of your day.